New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. Dr. Robert with you over here.
Oh, and I'm Reverend Bill over here.
And this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. It happens every Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. So thank you for being with us. Rev Z is off on another project today. And so I have the great pleasure of sharing the next 45 minutes to an hour or so with my dear friend, Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. He is the spiritual director of New Thought Philadelphia. Reverend Bill, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much. And I feel like I'm on the grown-up program now because I've been on the Friday morning show of Ministers Talking Stuff every now and again. And and this one is the one where the more thoughtful and somber guests get to visit. So thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We're grateful you were able to make it. I'm grateful that we were finally able to get you scheduled for this program as well. That Friday morning seems to be, you can slip in the door almost any Friday and we'd say hello. This program does have a little bit more of a focus to it, as you mentioned.
And some gravitas, I think.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. I'll take that. And for those that might be joining us for the very first time, New Thought Today is centered around the concept of what is the future? What's the future vision? What's emerging? What's happening in the New Thought world? And truthfully, I can't think of a more New Thought guy than yourself because you're involved in pretty much, well, not all the different New Thought organizations, but you obviously know people in all the different New Thought organizations. And you are very involved in a couple of the very instrumental New Thought organizations. We're going to talk about that a little as we go. But what I would love to start off with is to give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about New Thought Philadelphia. And now you're not a Center for Spiritual Living. You're not a Unity Church. You're not a Divine Science Church. You are a fully independent and all that. So tell us a little bit more about New Thought Philadelphia.
We call it New Thought Philadelphia, even though the co-founders were all came out of religious science. That's our training. And the way that I got into that is I started in the late 90s in Religious Science International and did a little bit at a United Church when I moved to Philadelphia, the United Church of Religious Science, UCRS, I believe it was called at that point, and then found an independent center, which was affiliated with Anton, and the credentialing was done through the Emerson Theological Institute. And that's where I did my practitioner studies. I then moved to a group that was called the Center for Spiritual Living, but it was actually part of Religious Science International at the time that So it then became the International Centers for Spiritual Living, when the United Church became the United Centers for Spiritual Living, and there was this jockeying and putting together. So I was involved in the leadership there, and went through my ministerial training, and finished my ministerial training right at the time that the two organizations merged into the single Centers for Spiritual Living that they are now. And as with that coming together, I got squeezed out like a tube of toothpaste, and we had the opportunity and the flexibility to have everything that we had learned about all of the different organizations, the independent ones, the United, the International, and kind of pick what it is that we wanted to create for ourselves. So we didn't call it Religious Science, and we didn't call it Center for Spiritual Living. We used the name New Thought because that's the one that all the groups have in common. So we are New Thought Philadelphia, and we present ourselves as New Thought, and all of the language that we're using pretty much reflects the teaching and the philosophy from Ernest Holmes and religious science, although we're not locked into it.
Yeah, beautiful. Great way to express it. And I was involved at that same time in what some call the reunification, others call the merger, some called it a takeover. We're still not really sure.
Leveraged buyout.
The leveraged buyout, that happened as well. Yeah, I believe. And I've said this before publicly, so I got no problem saying it. In my upbringing within this philosophy, I was really taught to be a spiritual snob. So the folks from Emerson and other independent centers, that was all well and good and nice and such, but you just weren't CSL. So I didn't pay attention or try to create relationships or learn anything about people outside the organization. It was actually quite frowned upon at that time. Some might say it still is. But then a few years ago, we bounced into each other, and you said something. The very first time I remember us meeting, you said something that kind of kicked me in the butt, and I walked away feeling like, oh wow, that's not what I want to be. And I don't know if you remember this, but what you said is, oh yeah, you're the guy I've been trying to talk to for 6 months, but you don't answer my phone calls. Yeah, I guess I am, and I'm going to apologize for that. And but that was in an Anton conference. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, and I didn't realize that it was spiritual snobbery that had to do with that. I've had lots of people who have ducked my calls for 6 months or more at a time, and that's okay. So Anton is the affiliated New Thought Network, and it is one of those umbrella organizations that is meant to support and connect together people who are in various New Thought organizations. And it started out as religious science. Basically, it was an alternative to people who didn't want to be part of one of the either RSI or UCSL or UCRS. So it was a third option, and the credentialing organization that it's kind of brother and sister with is Emerson Institute. And Anton is a wonderful organization, and the complexion of it has changed a lot since it first started as being a support organization for independent religious science ministers, because there's something bigger that's going on. So Anton has now grown to the point where it is supporting all of the different New Thought traditions. And I was, for a while, I was on the board and vice president, and the only reason that I stopped that is because I'm now the administrator of the affiliated New Thought Network. So it's a staff position, and I'm doing a lot of technology and making things work at the organization. And that lets me get involved with the people who are making things happen at Anton. Along the way, I had a friend urge me to find out about the International New Thought Alliance, INTA, which is the granddaddy of these. So it's been around. It predates predates Ernest Holmes. The Fillmores at Unity were around as it was coming into being. It's 125, 130 years old. It's 120 years old, I think, is how old the organization is next year. And it has a lot of oomph. And I went to my first INTA Congress, which is what they call them. It was in 2019. And the friend who had brought me into that, who was Tim Stewart, Dr. Tim Stewart, had grown up as a Christian minister, and then he had gone into Centers for Spiritual Living and then gotten involved in Unity, and then he's now in Divine Science. And he said something that really resonated with me. He says, people who know one of the New Thought denominations think that the others are all completely different. Anybody who knows two of them understands that we're exactly the same with a little bit of contour and shading. And that really stuck with me. And of course, allowed my friend J. Scott Neal to recruit me onto the executive board of the INTA, where I still am. And I got involved in doing the virtual congresses when getting together in person wasn't a thing, and now I've been involved in putting together a couple of in-person congresses. And INTA is an organization that's really getting back to its roots of connecting the New Thought organizations together. So in Chicago, not last summer, but the summer before, we had the great idea. Let's bring the leaders from all of the New Thought organizations together to sit on one panel and talk about what we have in common and what makes us different, and then let each of them do a panel presentation or a keynote of their own during the Congress. And I thought it was wonderful. It was rich and fascinating, and the part that was the most curious to me is that nobody had ever thought of it before, or hadn't thought of it in 50 years. So, and the conversation that started there is, let's do this some more. Let's keep in touch. The leaders said, we're here in person together. Let's keep in touch. Let's keep this going. And there was an opportunity to somebody suggested, let's do a once a month prayer call. So the leaders started doing a once a month prayer call on Zoom. And it turned out that the technology got away from them, and it was a lot of last minute scrambling. So because Anton is the affiliated New Thought Network, I said, let's have Anton host the meeting, and we put it into our automated meeting schedule platform thing. And so that's now an ongoing thing. So every month on the first Wednesday, there's a 15-minute call where the leaders get together to set an intention, to do a reading, to say a prayer, and then if we want, we can stick around and talk to each other. But there's such wonderful cross-pollination. And there are people who I'd known about before, but I didn't know what the group that they were involved in, was about. I mean, I'd been friends with Sheila McKeithen forever. And she's now the president of the United Foundation for Better Living. And a lot of people who are in Unity, or a lot of people who are in religious science go, what's that?
Yes.
And it's another way of having exactly the same message with slightly different language to appeal to a specific group of people, because that's their posse, that's their constituency. And again, as Dr. Tim said, we're all the same. We use different language. Yeah.
I remember Dr. Tim saying the same thing in one of my earliest conversations with him, that we come to believe that, and I think this is natural in human consciousness. We come to believe that our way is the best way. We come to believe that how we've learned something is what's going to most resonate with everybody. And well, that's just not the truth of it.
Well, except for me. And that's the problem. And everybody thinks, these people are not agreeing. They should figure out a way to agree with each other, and they should all agree with me.
Yeah.
And then it's game on.
And then it's game on. And now, so that was, you're talking about the INTA Congress in Chicago, which was a year ago, this past July. But then again, something very similar happened in Fort Lauderdale this past year. Tell us a little bit about that too.
The first year, the opening panel was all of the leaders talking about their organizations and what they have in common and what was different. And basically everybody got a chance to say, this is what makes my group spectacular. And they asked me to moderate a panel, and the panel I did was on education. And I called it Teaching Consciousness, because that's what we're doing. And we can't teach anybody consciousness. What we can do is help them cultivate the consciousness that they already have. And there are different ways that we teach it and different ways that we express it and explain it. I've been at a church growth seminar with Gary Simons, who's in Unity. And it was outside D.C. So there were some Unity folks who were there. There were some religious science folks who were there. And being D.C., there were a lot of divine science folks there. And the opening session on Friday evening, Gary's looking around the room and says, we got everybody here. And we all think that we're different. And here's what the difference is. Okay? Religious science has really good music, and Unity has Jesus Christ. And it was tongue-in-cheek, but, he made his point. So we all have our lane. So we did this education panel and talked about what we have in common and what's different. And And I put out the challenge: is there a way that we can teach introduction to new thought all the same way? And there was some interest in pursuing the conversation, and a couple of the people who were there said, "No way. We are not going to give up the way that we do this, and we're not going to let somebody else water down the credentials that we're offering, et cetera." So there was some enthusiasm, but there was some pushback. And then in Fort Lauderdale, there was a very similar panel talking about education. And one of the questions was, can we all figure out a way to teach New Thought 101 the same way? With a little bit of a flavor, so that if you're coming from Unity or if you're coming from Divine Science, you can express what makes your group different. And of course, encourage people. If you continue with us, you're going to get more of this. That's going to be in our particular flavor. It's going to be religious science. It's going to be divine science. And there was enthusiasm for it, and there was buy-in from the people who had been resisting it a year earlier. So next year at the INTA Congress, which by the way is going to be at Unity Village, which is becoming the home base for a lot of stuff that's going on in New Thought, because it's just such a spectacularly gorgeous campus, and also everybody there thinks and speaks New Thought,
Right.
which is, that's the chances of just sitting down at the table outside a cafe and happen to get into a conversation with a New Thought minister. It's much more likely there than it is in downtown Philadelphia.
Well, and even the hotel staff and support people, and they all understand what we need when we use our New Thought jargon.
Right.
And aren't surprised to find a bunch of people that are genuinely happy about life. So
Yeah. So there's and so what's going to be happening next year and the program is still coming together, is it's going to be based on education, and it's going to be based on what all of the organizations have in common, which is Thomas Troward.
yeah,
Because Ralph Waldo Emerson did the philosophical work of saying, hey, this is a great idea, and Phineas Quimby said, hey, let me try and make that actually work in the real world. And then Troward said, here's how you put a framework together to actually do this.
Yeah.
And that was, the same time that Emma Curtis Hopkins was doing her stuff. So they were contemporaries. And he was like the prime vector, because Ernest Holmes studied with him, and the Fillmore studied with him. And he was a contemporary with the folks who started Divine Science. And the other ones have been an outgrowth of that. So we all have Thomas Troward in common. So we're gonna the focus is going to be on the children of Troward and how we teach New Thought. And some of it's going to be basics, like what does New Thought 101 look like? And the other one is, and we started to have the conversation, what do you do about credentials for ministers or for master's degrees or doctoral degrees? Because that varies state by state. And in Florida, for example, you have to do a lot of coursework to get a doctorate, but not so much for a master's degree. Well, the way that my school, Emerson Institute, is set up is a lot of it goes into the master's, and there's a bit additional to get the doctorate. So we need to work out those details if we want to, or at least to understand what the differences are, so that we can we can coexist in harmony.
Right. And I personally love this idea, and I want to applaud you for being a champion of this, and not just being, oh yeah, it's a good idea, maybe hopefully it'll happen someday, but continually working to bring this idea into form, because we can all teach from our strength, but a unified curriculum also allows us to say, and I'm not a Unity expert, but we have a whole chapter on that. And I bring in a special guest to my class that week to help share a little bit more on the Unity perspective or the Divine Science perspective, which goes a long way to shortcutting that spiritual snobbery that I talk about. Again, when I went through my foundational classes, we talked about Emerson and Troward and Emma Curtis Hopkins. We never even talked about the Fillmores. We never talked about how other voices and other perspectives of consciousness studies influence the progress, the development, and the eventual evolution of New Thought. And that's what I'm really excited about, is we can ensure that the future generation of students gets a taste of all of it.
Absolutely. And it's such a powerful teaching, and it's such a simple teaching. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of, when we get into the core belief of New Thought, then there's a lot of implications that it has on everything in our lives. Yeah. So when we're actually living by principle, then everything else changes. But the principle itself is really simple. The principle itself is so simple. We were talking about this before the show, is that, because we both came up through religious science, and Ernest Holmes was the guy who wrote the book, and we know religious science fundamentalists who think that if Ernest Holmes didn't write it or say it, then it's not true or it's not worth looking at.
Exactly.
And I kind of disagree with that. And the Declaration of Principles, Ernest Holmes' Declaration of Principles, which is 11 items. And you read through them and you say, okay, there's nothing in here that's not true. There are several of them that kind of contradict each other. There are definitely a bunch that are repetitive or redundant, or both. And when we started New Thought Philadelphia and we were an independent center, it's like, okay, we can say that, we can read that, we can include that and incorporate it and address it, or we can do something different, or we can do both. Because coming up with a different way of saying it for New Thought Philadelphia does not make the Declaration of Principles go away.
Right.
So we used the very clever technique of looking at what other people had done, and at Agape, they at that point had 5 principles in their Declaration of Principles. They now have 6. That's the magic of having your founder still working.
Right.
It becomes a moving target, and the stuff keeps on changing. But we extrapolated from that. We said, okay, if you can do 11 and you can do 5, then it's a teaching of oneness. Let's do 1. What's the one that they all boil down to? And we spent some time on it, and we came up with a long version and a short version. And the long version is only like either one long run-on sentence or 2 little sentences. And we changed it. We actually added a word a few years back. And we say it every Sunday morning, and it's easy enough that I can say it now, and there's plenty of time to repeat it. We believe there is one power, love, intelligence, or force that creates everything, including each of us, and we are each using that same power, love, intelligence, or force to create our lives according to our beliefs.
Beautiful.
That's it. Now, that's 2 sentences or 1 run-on sentence, and I'm okay with that. And we added force, power, love, intelligence, or force, because let's face it, Star Wars changed the psyche of the world.
Yes.
And that's the force that we're talking about. So Let's name it and claim it.
Yep.
And the short, pithy way to say it is your new life begins with a new thought.
There you go.
So, which is similar to change your thinking, change your life, except changing your thinking is really hard.
And I've heard people say, well, I don't want to change my life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
but
I've heard that too.
But a lot of people are willing to consider a new life.
And the way that and I thought about that because a really good friend of mine said, I'm really happy with my life now. Why do I want a new life? And I said, I understand. It's going along very nicely. And take a deep breath. I encourage you, take a deep breath and hold it. Are you happy with that breath?
Less and less.
Eventually, you're going to want another one. And our new life is continuously reinventing itself.
Yeah.
We learn some stuff about science. And it's the way that we get to language things. Oh, I'm happy where I am now. Okay, great. You're happy where you are now. And people say, do I ever repeat the same prayer? And the answer to both of those questions, you can't repeat the same prayer, because even if it's the same words, it's a different time, you're a different person, you have different experiences, and you're in a different place. Oh, by the way, as you're sitting there completely motionless, you're on the surface of a sphere that's spinning, that's traveling around the sun at relatively good speed, that's part of a galaxy and a universe that's also moving. total motion about 67,000 miles an hour.
Right.
You can't do the same prayer because you're in a different place. And just pretending that you're in the same place, that's just pretending.
That's just pretending. Exactly. Hey, folks, we're going to take a quick break. You're watching New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Our special guest today is Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony of New Thought Philadelphia. And again, we're going to take just a quick break, but please stay with us. Hit the like button, the share button, the subscribe button. Let your friends and family know what we're doing here on New Thought Media Network. We're going to come back with more of New Thought Today in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You are a gift. That is the absolute truth. You are a gift, a blessing to the world, a way that the infinite love of God shines itself, shares itself, and expresses itself more fully in the world. You are a gift and a blessing. Please take that seriously. Take it as your honor. Take it as your opportunity to be a light that shines for others. Be that bright light of God's love that's the truth of who you are. And enjoy it, because you deserve it.
And we're back with more of New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. Now, those astute viewers may recognize that our first commercial spot there included a familiar voice. That was you, Dr. Bill, and that's what one of the things I love that you do is God calls. Because to me, it really represents a new way of looking at how we communicate the New Thought message. So if you would, tell us a little bit about God calls. How did it come into being? And what is it that people might expect from a God call?
I'll start at the end of that one. A God call is a 30-second message. It comes in on your phone or your voicemail. Random times, there are 4 of them a week. And they're really playing to my skill set. My strengths, because they're 30 seconds long. It's usually a pithy idea. I spent a long time in the radio biz, starting out in top 40 AM radio. So getting an idea in 30 or 60 seconds is pretty straightforward. And it's a concept that several of the people who are subscribing to God Calls, which is like $6 a month, and it just comes in at those random times, are ministers. And they have noticed that each one of them could be fleshed out into a Sunday morning talk. Or used as a story in a Sunday morning talk. So the way that they started was, I've been in a mastermind group for decades at this point. And every once in a while, the guys in this group would call each other. And when the person answered, you just say something nice and positive and uplifting, and there's no requirement for somebody to say anything. And that was a God call. You don't even say thank you or I love you back or anything. It's just like, sometimes thank you, but no need to respond. And so I just started doing that with this recorded call system. And so it's been going every week since 2014, I think.
Wow, I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I love them, folks. It is, and they're. I know that you have so many of them, you can't possibly be reading my mind. However, they're always like right on cue for something that I need to hear, or something that is that is up, a question that maybe is in my mind. And I remember one pretty specifically. My wife and I were on our way. We were in the car and we were on our way to a thing, and we were going to need to make a decision. I forget if it was a purchasing decision or just we weren't sure what was going to happen when we got to where we were going. And the phone rang. And on my phone, I have it programmed. It just says God. So the phone rings and it's God. And I show it to my wife, and she looks at me like, "What do you want me to do?" I was like, "Answer the call, right? Hit the green button and let's see what God has to say about all this." And it was the perfect message of be present to what's happening and be trusting that there's something higher at play here, that there is something you may not understand in this moment, but is going to make itself evident and going to make itself clear exactly as it's necessary to do. So I'll say it till the ends of the earth. I love them. They are great. And I will say sometimes I don't always answer, and then I get the experience of having like 4 of them in my voicemail, and I go to clear my voicemail, and it's like, "You have 15 messages," and I'm like, "I bet at least 5 of them are God calls." And I'll listen to a few of them in a row, and it's really a fun experience.
Thank you. Yeah, it always surprises me that whether somebody answers it live or it goes to voicemail, the comment that comes back the most often is, "It was exactly what I needed to hear right then. It was exactly the right message." And I have no idea how that works, because when we're doing them, I'll record 4 of them at a time and just decide which dates they're going to go on. And then in the scheduling system, just say, "This one will go at 2:15. So none of it is intentional. It just kind of happens. And the number of people who say that the timing was perfect, it just goes completely beyond anything that I could plan. So I'm okay with that. And we're turning it into a book. A pithy thought for the day book.
Okay.
And we're talking about other things to do with it. The challenge is if we put it into a podcast and people try to binge listen, it's like eating cotton candy. It's nice to have a taste, but by the time you've had your 4th cotton candy in a row, it's like, no. This is too sweet.
Yeah. I'll take one little bite. That's enough. But
then go on and do something different.
It gets to be too much. I hear you. Perfect. So, all right, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk a little bit about Anton, the affiliated New Thought Network, because I feel like in some ways I took your job. You were on the board, and then you stepped off the board to be the administrator, and somehow I got elected to the board. So while I didn't actually take your job, it kind of feels like you've moved into another role there, and I've been affirmed to step into a role that, honestly, I have no idea what I've really gotten myself into.
Well, I was actually going to say, I've said it to you in person, but I will say this to you on the network now. My congratulations and condolences to you on your post on the Anton board. And yeah, it was one of those things where the pieces had shuffled around. Some number of years ago, the administrator had been Jerry Troyer, and he was the best qualified to take over as the president, so he got voted onto the board so that he could move into the job of president. And that left the administrator job empty, so John Karn, who was on the board, stepped down from the board so that he could become the administrator. And somewhere around there was when I joined the board. It might have been taking John's position. I don't remember at this point. But then John recently had the opportunity to become the dean of Emerson Institute and be the representative on the board from Emerson. So he left the administrator position and moved to the Emerson rep position. And then I moved into the administrator position. So it's this complete either shell game. So it's 3-card Monte, it's 5 jobs and 5 people, and you just shuffle them around. It's like everybody's in a different job. So, and welcome to the board, and we'll see how your first full meeting goes tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. I look forward to it. And what I want to say and what I want to chat about is having, as I've shared my background in New Thought and moving away from being, quote, a strict religious scientist and moving more into the greater realm of understanding that New Thought is much more than just a label. When we talk about things like Universal Foundation for Better Living and Divine Science International and what's happening at Sunshine Cathedral and what's happening in other aspects of New Thought's evolution into mainstream consciousness, mainstream life, Anton really stood out for me as a support mechanism for just more than ministers. And I know that's a phrase that people are going to hear a lot more. In that little clip we showed, it shows the mission statement as connecting supporting individuals, communities, and organizations. And I think that's really important. And I'd love to hear some of your insights on that.
And yeah, the mission of the affiliated New Thought Network is connecting the New Thought community in consciousness and love. And that has been a powerful thing for me because, like I mentioned earlier, right as I was going into my ministry, I was squeezed out of the CSL organization for reasons that had everything to do with the politics of the organization. And I went to my first Anton retreat. At that point, it was in Scottsdale, Arizona. And at the check-in table, I mentioned something about politics, and whoever was says, "Oh yeah, we don't do politics." It's like, yeah, you're right. And Anton doesn't do politics. Anton is exactly the sort of organization that I would love to be part of, because the answer is yes, and what we look for is love. And the way the Emerson folks say it is that consciousness is the sole authority. So if we find ourselves in disagreement, then we can stop and pray, and and find what our common ground is. All the disagreements don't happen very much.
I have yet to find disagreements. Exactly. There are questions, and I think we saw that in the membership meeting this past year. There are understandings to one side, or understand this is how I understand it. This is how I understand it. But it feels like no matter what the discussion is, it comes back to that sense of love and compassion. And people are there for the betterment of New Thought rather than just the betterment of themselves, of their own brand, let's say.
And it's a combination of giving and receiving. So everybody is getting filled by the well of being together, and there's an opportunity of, I'm not going to compete with this person. We're going to be in the room together. And there is plenty of opportunity for competition. You have 3 or 4 New Thought communities that are within a 45-minute drive of each other. There's going to be who's got the most people, and if we're going to have a concert, who's going to from their place is going to come to my concert, and who's from my place is going to go to their concert, and am I going to lose my people if they're doing something really cool? And that's a natural human sort of a thing. And the fact of the matter is, the growth that's going to happen in any of our centers is not going to come from poaching people from other centers.
Right.
Okay? When I drive 45 minutes from New Thought Philadelphia to another one of the communities in our area, I go past an awful lot of Christian churches.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And they're not very full. And it's the people who used to be going to the Christian churches that are the ones who we want to be talking to.
I was listening to another program here on the network this morning. Reverend Dr. Sherry Johnson had the new spiritual director, Reverend Christina Jones from the Althea Center, on her program. And one of the things she was sharing is that here in the Denver area, it can appear that there's a lot of competition. Mm-hmm. There is the Althea Center, which is the original Divine Science community founded by Nona Brooks and such. And there is the Center for Spiritual Living Denver, and there is Mile High Church, and there is 3 or 4 different Unity churches in the Denver metro region. And she said somebody had asked her about the competition with these other people. And we all know each other. We all hang out together at the same functions, and somebody's getting ordained, and it doesn't matter where you're from. You show up and you say hello, or our ministerial graduations, we all get together. And she said, I stopped the conversation right there, and I said, look, there's over 1 million people in Denver metro area. we don't need 1 million people. So what competition is there? You can have your 1,000 or 10,000. I can have my 1,000 or 10,000. Everybody, and that's one of the things that, again, really struck me about Anton is people generally. It feels like a sense of genuine concern and love to support each other, no matter where we are, in bringing forward this powerful and life affirming and life transformative philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
And pretending that we're different limits what's going to happen next in the possibilities.
Yes. And that is a perfect segue, because what we're going to do in our final segment, folks, is take a look at exactly what Reverend Dr. Bill sees as the future possibilities. But before we do that, we do want to make sure we say thank you to our organizational sponsors and individual donors. So please don't go away. We'll be right back in just 1 minute with more of New Thought Today. Stay tuned. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. My special guest, Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony, Spiritual Director of New Thought Philadelphia. Bill, I do want to say directly and on air, thank you so much for the financial contribution that New Thought Philadelphia makes to the network and helping us to continue to spread this mighty message across the planet. So we appreciate that. And want to give a quick shout out, because not only are you a special guest, and you know we kind of twist your arm to show up on a lot of different programs around here, you also have a program of your own that happens on Tuesday mornings, 11 o'clock Mountain Time. Tell us a little bit more about that before we wrap up today.
It's on Mondays. It's the Practical Prayer Podcast. And actually what we do is the podcast has been going for over 2 years now. It is different than most podcasts because it's just me and my co-host, and we have a different conversation about an aspect of New Thought. And it's been going, like I say, for 2 years every week, and it's not getting old. Which is wonderful and refreshing. So that's the Practical Prayer Podcast. And we had been producing it ourselves for a while, and then got the brilliant idea of, let's do a live recording session on New Thought Media Network. So we do a little pre-show, and we talk to the folks who are in the audience, take some comments, questions, prayer requests, and stuff. And then we record the podcast episode, and then we do a little post-show profile afterwards. So the podcast itself is, you get it where you get podcasts. But it's audio only. So the thing that we do on the live stream has video of us as well, so you can see her rolling her eyes when I say something goofy. and yeah, that's Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern, I guess 11 o'clock Mountain.
11 o'clock Mountain. Yes, on Mondays. I'll get that right one of these days, I promise. So,
Well, if you're tuning in on Tuesdays, it explains why you're not there.
yes. All right. And before we go, I do want to explore, and we have more than enough time to actually, well, maybe not. This could be a very large question. But we love on this program to look at what the future holds. And I know that we don't actually have crystal balls and we can't really see exactly what's going to happen. But from where you sit, being integral in various New Thought organizations with the long history you have of this philosophy, where do you see New Thought going? What's the vision for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out as you see this philosophy expanding into greater awareness and, as I've said more often, more mainstream consciousness?
I sometimes describe New Thought as the greatest hits of all the world's religions. And, they shorthand that by, if you could love like Jesus and meditate like Buddha and pray like Muhammad and believe like Moses or Abraham, that's a pretty good start. And what we want to do is not make any of those religions wrong. We want to take the best from all of them. Okay, there's some stuff that Hinduism has that's really powerful. There's some stuff that Baha'i believes. There's, watching the Sikhs at the Parliament of World Religions gave me a new appreciation of service. If we can take the best of all of that and bring together the people who are passionate about some or all of it, then there's a huge future that's available for us. And I think that traditional religion is serving people less and less. At the very least, it's serving fewer and fewer people in the way that it had been. Because organized religion and attendance in church tends to be down overall. And is that because people don't have time for it? Because spirituality isn't important? Or because the message isn't resonating anymore? And New Thought being the message that is, we are creating our life experience, it requires a big step into responsibility. Oh, if I don't like what's happening in my life, I have to look within. Ooh, who wants to do that? But that's the part that self-help has taken over from New Thought and has been very successful doing it without using a spiritual context. And I think the future of New Thought is claiming self-help and the ability to look at our life, understand what we like, understand what we don't like, and choose more of the good stuff, please, and then turn that into a spiritual practice to actually open ourselves up to that newness and that goodness happening for us. We keep on having experiences that we just can't explain. And you were talking about it with the God call. The God call shows up and it happens to be exactly what you needed to hear at the moment. A friend of mine wasn't feeling well and wound up at the doctor, and they were concerned, well, maybe there's a blood clot, so we want to make sure, send him to the ER. They found a little blood clot. Oh, now he had to stay overnight. And I'm in touch with his wife, and I said, this is all unfolding in sweet perfection. And nobody wants to hear that in the middle of something. Right. But afterwards, it turns out that the neurologist gave him, a green light. There's not a problem here. There's not been a clot. There hasn't been a stroke or a heart attack or any of that stuff. So maybe it's a virus or maybe something going on with, something that's extraneous. And that's how the love is unfolding. So did I make that happen? No, I didn't make that happen. I accepted that as a possibility that could happen and opened the doors to that. And that's the way the teaching works, is we are not controlling things. We are participating in the creation of things and accepting our accountability for the stuff that gets created in our lives. So it's a big ask, but I think that people are more and more being ready for that. And it's our job to figure out how to get the message across. Because it's possible to hide it in arcane language, and insist that somebody do a spiritual mind treatment with a practitioner so they can manifest a demonstration. Like, who the hell knows what that means?
Exactly. And we have the education that still makes us, what? Okay.
I took the opportunity to re-language a lot of what I learned in religious science, in specific, and New Thought in general. So I do a spiritual mind treatment, but I call it a practical prayer. And I manifest a demonstration, but I call it a result. So we do a practical prayer to get a result instead of a spiritual mind treatment to manifest a demonstration, because people who don't know what a spiritual mind treatment is still understand, oh, it's a practical prayer, which makes it different from another prayer. The first question is, what makes it practical? Oh, well, now we're going to talk.
Right.
And you know what the result is? It's an answered prayer.
Yeah.
You know, we get to dive into some notes. Who's answering the prayer? Come to class.
Well, and I love how you phrased it just a moment ago, that we get to participate in the possibility of the healing. It's I know I have faced this question so many times. So, why does bad stuff happen to good people? And what you're sharing is that it isn't that things happen to us. It's that things happen.
Right.
And then we get to choose how we participate in the result of those experiences.
Right. Bad things happening to good people. Well, the first thing you need to do is understand who's calling it good or bad. So, and I'll ask you, this is my favorite question to ask. Nuclear explosion, good or bad?
I'm going to go with bad.
Okay. An astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun. We are 1 astronomical unit away from a very important nuclear reaction, nuclear explosion, and if it stopped, it'd get dark and cold really fast.
True.
So, sun, good or bad? Everybody says good. Okay, but you just said no. So now it becomes more of a real estate question, like location, location, location.
Yes. So proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Explosion in my backyard. Bad.
Bad. Right.
Billion miles away at the sun. Yeah. Okay.
And the same thing happens. The things that we describe as bad sometimes are the launching point for something that would never have happened if the bad thing didn't happen.
Right. Yes.
The volcanoes erupting tend to be the way that real estate gets created.
Yes.
Exactly. I don't want to be on that particular island while it's happening.
I don't think any of us actually wanted to live through the pandemic of 2020, and yet we lived through the pandemic of 2020, and the world is a better place for the scientific discoveries and the scientific expediency that was created because of that.
Yeah, we learned something, and we had the opportunity to grow. Sometimes not the ways that we wanted to. I had great plans for 2020 going into it, and I had to change them.
Exactly. Perfect. Hey, folks, we're going to wrap this up. This is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. My guest today has been Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony from New Thought Philadelphia. His website, their website is going across the bottom of the screen there. Please tune into his program, Practical Prayer Podcast, on Mondays. Don't be like me and show up a day late. On Mondays at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 1 o'clock Eastern. And New Thought Philly is part of our all-day Sunday programming. So you can catch Dr. Bill, Just the Talk, at 2:30 on Mountain Time on Sunday afternoons, right here on the New Thought Media Network as well. Dr. Bill, before we go, anything I've missed? Any final thoughts?
I don't think there's anything that you've missed. Your new life begins with a new thought. Have a good one.
And I'm going to just echo that and say, yeah, have a good one. Thank you for being with us, folks. We'll be back again next week. Here on this program, we'll have Mendy Audlin. She's a licensed Unity teacher, and her ministry is What If Up. I think you're really going to enjoy that conversation as well, so plan to join us for that. Please feel free to share today's broadcast with your friends and family and let them know what they might have missed by not being a part of this. All of our programming is available on our archives on our YouTube channel. Just search out hashtag New Thought Media Network, playlists for all of our programs, and you can find stuff real easy over on the YouTube channel. Until next time, we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.
See ya.